Welcome to the Mad Profit Podcast, where we interview active investors, entrepreneurs, and experts who left corporate jobs to buy or start successful ventures and live life on their own terms. Listen to their stories, learn from their experiences, and heed their advice so you too can create mad profits and the life you've always wanted. And now, here's your host, Laurent Truc.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back. This is Laurent Truc from the Mad Profit Podcast, and I am excited to have a special guest today with us, Bruce Simpson, founder of SwitchGrear Consulting. Bruce, how are you today?
I am fantastic, Ron. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you so much for making the time and joining us. I'm looking forward to this. You've spent a lot of time working with entrepreneurs and networking and all that, so I really want to learn a lot from you and pick your brain and see what comes from this conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
I humbly hope I can offer some value in the dialogue.
I'm sure you will. Great. So Bruce, can you give us a little bit of background about yourself, where you come from, what got you here?
Well, without revealing my full age, I have an honors degree in biology. Which naturally leads to large-scale change and entrepreneurial adventures. I think what I would fast forward to when I was at Bell Canada was probably my big aha, and I ended up being part of the breakdown of long-distance competition. Mm-hmm. And I had joined the first win-back group at Bell Canada. And, going to customers to convince them the error of their ways and come back, we missed you and love you, was by itself a big change initiative to get change to happen. I fell into some really great opportunities that nobody else wanted. Okay. Sometimes when they're dressed in overalls, they scare people off. And so one of them was the build out of Bell Canada's response to talking to customers that we hadn't talked to before. Okay. So we ended up building a whole bunch of call centers. We proactively wanted to talk to customers. And in many ways, that was new for us. And in doing so, one of the projects I ended up was analyzing the third-party call center market. Okay. And I ended up getting a gift because I was paid to really try and understand how Bell Canada might actually play in a space, or how we might outsource and partner with other companies to help some of our call centers at that time, now customer contact. And so, myself and one other fellow ended up doing a detailed analysis. Mm-hmm. And we ended up putting together a business plan to be, not only we would answer the 800 number with a human being, we would be Bell Canada's customer contact. And they laughed at us because they were more focused on their core revenues that they were losing, and they didn't want to go into business with their customers. Mm-hmm. And so myself and another individual entrepreneur threw caution to the wind and borrowed $7.5 million and started a company that became Sitel International and Client Logic, and is now the second largest third-party outsourcing company in the world.
Wow.
And so along that journey, I started to realize that there was lots of money for strategy. There was tons of money that everybody was getting, a new deck, a new PowerPoint, mm-hmm. a new strategy, but nobody was actually helping the little guy who was just trying to figure out, how do we get better at what we do, and how do we change and create change. And, one day while, my head's down on my desk crying, I envisioned being the co-pilot for somebody like Bruce, who, started with two guys and $7.5 million, and 18 months later, is in charge of, 2,500 employees and growing.
Wow, that's incredible.
So we just caught a lucky trend that people were trying to, the customer experience was starting to matter. Mm-hmm. And instead of, how fast can you answer the phone and how fast can you get them off the phone, which is truthfully what people thought about. Now, oh my gosh, we have to sell them something. We have to solve really complicated problems. As all the simple work went away to, being done on the web or on your phone, it's become a really, really big thing. So when we sold the company to Onyx as their entry point into customer service, we started another company called InsLogic.
Okay.
And you should never have heard of InsLogic because it was sort of the Intel inside that allowed white labeled insurance companies, like any company who was at the magic moment of insurance. When you buy a home, before you get a mortgage, you have to get insurance. When you buy a car, you have to make sure that you have insurance. So we built a company that would be the back end that would allow Ford insurance, Volvo insurance, City Mortgage insurance, any kind of key bank insurance to be able to have licensed agents and answer, thank you for calling your brand insurance company.
Wow. And that was was that the technology infrastructure, the software, the people,
everything.
the whole, wow, that full outsourced.
Everything. So, it was back-end integration into legacy insurance companies' databases. It was real-time rating engines so that you could be able to rate and bind. So it gave you the economics of a direct writer, but the choice and benefits of a broker, but just with better economics.
Yeah.
And so the brands benefited, and it was very sticky. And we sold that company. We sold that company to Capital One as their way into everyone's wallet.
Very nice.
And then I set off on a mission to start SwitchGrear, which was really just to be the kind of co-pilot for operational leaders who are charged with solving world hunger and world peace all on the same day and keeping the shop open, right? So that's what SwitchGrear's done for the last 18 years. And we've become very, very refined. We're not doing big strategy. I think sometimes you have to define what you don't do.
Yeah.
And so rather than we're going to compete by doing more strategy documents, we actually climb inside the washing machine of customer-facing operations and actually help them deal with all the change and chaos that's coming at them.
Wow.
So that's what we do now.
And you're focused on every aspect of an entrepreneur's business, or really just on the customer facing side, sales, post-sales, customer service?
Our target, years ago, we used to have an offering that was really for entrepreneurs. It was really to be able to add service or professional services alongside of a technology. But most of our work has really become us as entrepreneurs, helping large companies large banks, large telephone companies, large insurance companies to try and actually handle customer contact better than they do today.
Excellent.
Yeah. So that's kind of where and our bullseye, if you imagine that, instead of it getting bigger like lots of companies, ours has actually got really, really small. So we don't do certain things. And I think that that's the beauty of really good strategy is you do one thing really, really well. And to do that, we arrive at, kind of the dialogue around networks.
Yes. So you and I met through a common friend who suggested I reach out to you because of the network that you were a part of. And as I started my entrepreneurial journey, that was not the first thing on my list to do. I was like, I got to figure out a whole bunch of operational things. I got to kind of map out everything in my world before I network, which was actually kind of counterintuitive for me as a sales guy. But I just didn't think I'd have the time. And after I met with you and some of the people in your group, I'm like, ooh, this is important. This is not just a now, this is an ongoing need. So love your perspective to share your perspective a little bit on networking and the groups that you've been a part of.
So first of all, you and I met at a tribe.
A tribe, yes.
And I honestly believe there's a difference. Just like business has evolved. I think there's an evolution of networks and networking that is, you can start to see evolving really clearly. So the how to get done all those things that you were trying to get done, and not waste time, not rework, and not misstep because you can't afford it, I think is kind of why you need a tribe and not just a network. And so, business today, everyone's talking about, the pace and the complexity. And I think for entrepreneurs or intrapreneurs, and I'm going to use those two quite differently, because I often think that some of the best entrepreneurs just escaped from large companies. Case in point, case in point, your journey.
I would like to agree with that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I think it's a really hard place, and I think the playing field that an entrepreneur is supposed to be an expert on is very broad, and you can't possibly have some of the expertise in everything from finance to operations to, how do I make sure that I don't misstep on technologies.
Yep.
And so I feel like what people are looking for in terms of, I'll call it a network, is really, really important. And I think you can't do it early enough, right? The ability to have somebody who's a trusted advisor, part of a tribe of specialists, to be able to call them up and say, I need some roadside assistance and I have no clue what's going on. Here are the 3 questions I'd love to start with. I think that's a gift that, isn't about, hey, I need the Glen Ross leads, right? Which is oftentimes what people think about when they think about networks or networking.
Yes.
And it's, to some extent, it's a little bit facing towards you in terms of what you get from a network or a group of people, or versus what you contribute and give to people first.
Excellent. So can you actually talk a little bit about the different types of networking versus tribe groups that are out there? I've seen the BNI type of groups where you're sharing leads, right? And it seems to be very much about that, of taking, tracking how many leads you give, how many leads you get type of stuff. There's other types as well. What else is out there?
Yeah, I think about the components, which, if you're trying to pick like what do I need personally? I think sometimes, especially as an entrepreneur, when 75% of the businesses fail because you can't raise, like you can't generate revenue.
Yeah.
A lot of them for an entrepreneur are around, where are the Glen Ross leads, and how do I get some revenue and some leads? And for me, I think oftentimes, like I participated in several of those. There was around both a BNI-like as well as a Chamber of Commerce and some other business lead gen platforms. And I really felt they tried to short circuit and commoditize something I felt very strongly about, and that was a relationship.
Okay.
And I see this often on LinkedIn too, right? Where somebody approaches me because they want to sell to somebody else that, they can see in my network, or they know that I know. And, you need to have a lot of confidence in both ends of that introduction. Both, hey, I need to know this person. I have to be intimate with them. I have to understand the value. And oh, by the way, if I'm going to introduce them to Laurent, that I really need to know that it's something that this person can add value and solve. And that I'm not just, sending somebody his way that I know is probably going to try and sell him something he may not need.
Sure.
So that's the first one for me. It's kind of the starting point. And I think lots of people start there in terms of I think about business associations or industry associations where you're representing the common good. And, I was born and raised in the customer contact area and the call center. And so becoming part of an industry association to to fight the stigma that many people thought that a call center is the person that calls you at dinner hour to sell you long distance. That was their paradigm. And
Sure.
so I think there's benefit to industry associations. I think of, a version that is of that is a community club like Rotary or Rotary International that contributes and serves, in a shared community.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think about, honestly, there's peer learning, right? YPO or McKay forums, where people who are have like interests, similar kind of level or genre, but non-competing industries get together and they share. They talk about relevant topics. And then I think probably further up the chain is tribes. And for me, what differentiates them is that they are based typically on values.
Okay.
And very clearly a give first mentality. The one that you and I met at was Verticore, which, stands for, at the core, the values of integrity, respect, and trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so to allow somebody to get close enough to your problems, to understand vulnerably your weaknesses, requires a lot of, trust and respect and integrity. If you're actually going to be able to help somebody and make a difference for their business and then personally. So I think of tribes as a little bit of a, people talk about lean in. I like to think of, and you probably realized it a little bit, an entrepreneur needs somebody to lean on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was very impressed with the group, and to your point, the openness about the entrepreneurs' challenges that they had. The one that I went to that I remember the most was an individual that was looking to expand his business and really had put a problem out there to the group and said, I'm analyzing things like this. Do I go into new markets? And the entire group spent an hour just carving up different ideas and ways for him to approach the problem. And it was actually how grateful he was incredible. The smile on his face when he left with just this whole new brain and of views and different approaches that he can now take for his business was pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We have this dialogue because in the news is somebody who just was successful in the Dragon's Den of securing a fellow who was a Verticore member for many years.
Oh, really?
Built a product called Upseat, and really, really fantastic value-based guy who was solving a problem for his son, and saw and recognized that there was a problem that lots of parents faced. And so just the ability to be able to go, hat in hand, very humbly say, I don't have this figured out. I'm trying to pick a path. I need some input. And, that's invaluable, as opposed to you have all kinds of rework or you hit dead ends. And I just think that everyone's focused on, grit and tenacity. And those are big words right now in startup lingo.
Yep.
But I also think that, maybe if you didn't have to pivot as hard by getting input earlier, having somebody to say, like we have a process at Verticore called roadside assistance. You can get a tank of gas or, oh my God, I need a tow. And the ability to be able to put your hand up and know that it's going to be received by somebody who knows more about this than you do. And being able to do that to one individual or 3, roadside assistants, or a group of 40, which is what you saw when we ran a quorum.
Yep.
Like, that's a strategic advantage in life.
It is. I also found it impressive that, first of all, you have all different types of walks of life in the room, different types of business backgrounds and experiences. And just being able to have that angle of view on your business from somebody in a different industry, in a different world, that says, have you thought of this? no matter how much help you get from other people, your network is going to be limited, and you probably don't know somebody who is a dentist or like something completely out of your norm provides views that you may not have thought of. And I think it's incredible to see that dynamic take place.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, there's a little bit of the iceberg, and you only see kind of the monthly meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, on a regular basis, there is, you know, the roadside assistance, which says, you know, at the risk of being vulnerable, you know, I don't have all the answers. And in my work, we're in charge of solving big, big, nasty problems and transforming customers, organizations that, you know, are facing their customers.
Yeah.
Right. So like we can't pretend we have all the answers. And so oftentimes I have to, you know, I have to pull on a Laurent or somebody who, you know, I can borrow their brain. And if trust is in the equation and there's mutual respect, then it's incredible how much value you walk away with.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Where do you see kind of a mastermind group fitting in these different levels of tribes? It's like, does it fall within the same kind of, because I know a lot of mastermind groups have kind of the hot seat approach. Somebody talks about a business problem. I don't think they have this roadside assistance. Let me call you up whenever I need kind of help. What's your view on mastermind groups?
Well, so I'm not going to comment so much on mastermind groups. We've, like lots of things, we've figured out what works by figuring out what doesn't work. And so, you know, we used to run something called the Innovators Roundtable, which is similar to Verticor and a quorum that you saw. Is picking a very focused problem to get everybody's brains around, right? If you want to talk about finance and I want to talk about marketing and somebody else, like zoning us in on one specific problem is probably step number one, right? Crafting a very specific question for someone to answer. Number two is preparation in advance. I know that, you know, the Pitch Network and other places, they really gravitate towards the encapsulation of the pitch, so that you can, you know, sell somebody some financing or something. And from my point of view, I think that as much as I love Dragon's Den, I think it has harmed entrepreneurs in some way, because putting yourself out there, especially when you don't have it figured out, prevents a lot of people from refining really great ideas into something that would actually be magical.
Interesting.
So, like, if the intent is that you're trying to critique, poke holes, and in many cases, because it's done publicly, embarrass me, I feel like that the embrace of a network, a tribe, that is here, that is trying to give you maybe some tough love, maybe some, you know, choose path A versus path B. And here's what I think you haven't done yet that you need to do. I think that delivered in the right context is not only more helpful for the individual on the hot seat, if you will, but it's also far more beneficial because you get to learn. You get to see yourself in the problem.
Right.
There isn't one Verticor session in 20 years that I haven't walked away going, I learned something. I learned about my blind spot on this problem. I learned about somebody else had incredible contribution. And sometimes it's the person that spoke the least that had, like, you know, oh, by the way, here's the zinger question I think you've missed. Right. So from my point of view, I think they're all different. And I think you have to figure out what do you want from it?
Yeah.
What do you really need?
Very interesting. Very interesting. So if an entrepreneur is looking to join a group like this, where do you recommend they start? Like, how do they find the group that fits best with what they're looking for, with, you know, who they are? I mean, I'm sure personalities play a big part in this.
I'm going to break, for me, I think there is start or create than find in many ways. And the reason I say that is, if you find good golfers to be around, you're going to play better golf, right? So if you already know that Laurent is a good golfer, buy him a coffee, right? I think networking, by definition, we think is this scalable speed dating. I'll go and I'll increase, quickly, so I don't actually see it that way. I see it as Laurent and Bruce actually seem to have some shared values. We see some things very similarly, and I want to help him. And that's kind of how it starts. You can have let's pretend for a moment, you can have a tribe of two with a common interest of wanting to make a difference, to contribute and serve, whatever is the manifesto that you don't even need to write together.
Yeah. Very interesting.
So my first one would be, honest, my first coaching would be, don't wait. Just, you've met somebody, at an event, at a dinner party, just it's probably the most common use for me of LinkedIn isn't to ask somebody to sell. It's to say, hey, could I get your opinion on, or, what you said online, or, when we met actually really resonated for me. Could I grab the 15-minute virtual coffee and just exchange some ideas on that? Because I think it's actually a big issue for me and my company, or where I am in my development, or whatever.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So you can get it from one-on-one networking. Doesn't always necessarily need to be a formalized group.
Right. And so I think that sometimes people first think about networking as this scalable speed dating kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think about it in terms of it's one-on-one relationships. You just happen to have many of them. And so I think you can start your own. I think that people belong, if they step back, they actually belong to several tribes, right? I have a tribe that is an entrepreneurial tribe. I have a tribe that I lean on because solving customer contact problems for, large companies means I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
Right. I have people that I just go and talk to who have deep experience on how to change really nasty ingrown beliefs and just set ways of doing things that I just need time to talk about with them. And, relationships grow from that. And, you obviously reciprocate as a result of that. If you just take one way, it's a pretty short networking group you're going to have.
Yes.
Right. So I think my first one would be I think you can actually start your own, and I don't think you need to wait.
Got it.
I think what people want from their network is what you need to think about first.
Is that how Verticore was built? Kind of small relationships that blew up over time?
Yeah. You know what? How it started was a guy was laid off. And in the process of thinking about what his next opportunity was from the entrepreneurial company that he'd been part of growing, he said, it's really not what I do that matters so much. It's actually more who I do it with. And somebody challenged him that said, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that just at a job. And so, a tribe was born based on the values of integrity, respect, and trust, Verticore, at the core of its existence. So it kind of grew as a result of that, and grew tentacles, and has touched thousands of lives and companies trying to be a better version of themselves.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing,
and fun, I might add.
Yeah. Oh, and I just love the different formats that you guys had, bringing in guest speakers on topics that all entrepreneurs valued. The hot seat approach, the figuring out problems. It was a very, very fun number of sessions that I've been to.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
So one thing I ask all my guests, especially somebody like you who's worked with a number of different entrepreneurs and who has tried with different entrepreneurs, what are some of the resources that you would suggest a new entrepreneur leveraging as they kind of go off and start their business?
I think that for me, that they may, you start to hear the messages and the teachings, and I have a weekend study process that I take myself through just to keep trying to be relevant and to just challenge myself. And so one of them is Seth Godin, who wrote a book called Tribes. And so Seth quite some time ago really articulated, you need to find your tribe. When you were in high school, you may not have been the jock, you may not have been the computer science, you may have been the musical or theatrical group or the artistic group. And so I feel like people need to, they just need to find where it feels like you belong. And Seth really helps in terms of this whole world now is powered by tribes. Mm-hmm. People trying to help each other as opposed to trying to go it alone. So Seth, both Linchpin and Tribes are regular revisits on my audiobook track.
Excellent.
And so I would for sure point people towards that, because I think he actually defined the term for a generation of entrepreneurs when he started to clarify what tribes really meant. Mm-hmm. So both Tribes and Linchpin would be one, but almost anything. His newsletter is stark and naked, and it's a couple of lines of text, and they don't all resonate, but every now and then it's like, is he stalking me? And it's kind of helpful in terms of just, kind of looking through that. Right now I feel like the heyday of the pitch and the big idea is turning to the final mile between a problem worth solving and the execution capability that entrepreneurs have to actually deliver on. New funding models, how people are trying to retain, they have to get an MVP and they have to prove a concept. You need somebody to reach in their pocket. When we borrowed $7.5 million, it was a flyer. That's right. We were like starting a call center company meant you had to buy phone systems and desks and take rent, and it was a lot of money to spend. And hope. Now, like, nobody would go about doing that. You have to actually convince somebody to reach in their pocket and give you money before somebody would say, "Oh, okay, yeah." It's not. They're not just validating a good idea; they're actually putting money down on it. So I believe there's lots of books that help, that actually weave in networking and entrepreneurism and tribes as part of the core of how do you get an MVP to market. If you've read the Lean Startup, mm-hmm. right? He talks about a user community. And when you go to an MVP, I actually think that in there, he also introduces the concept of going to experts who are aggregators of insights of many customer groups. Okay. Yep. Going to other people and saying, please be mean to me. Mm-hmm. And saying, I'm trying to figure this out. Lean Startup is a fantastic one that actually, if you think about it in the context of a tribe or networking, actually is not just about end customers, it's about aggregated insights from bright people. Mm-hmm. For me right now, there's two others that I would point to. One is Brené Brown, whose work on vulnerability and shame is probably, in my mind, some of the most significant for entrepreneurs who are not just being pitchmen, but are trying to figure out how do they actually get something to get off the ground and be more than a proof of concept. And the whole concept, I've talked about a tribe of being able to go mm-hmm. with your hat in hand saying, Ed, Hamish, Edna, I'm just trying to figure this out. Mm-hmm. There's a huge amount of vulnerability that I think that many entrepreneurs, they wouldn't search for a tribe, but the vulnerability to actually get it right faster requires a lot of vulnerability to be able to do. And you would have seen some of that on display as people open up the kimono to all their problems at a group session.
Yeah, for sure.
It's really tough. So I would say that Brené Brown's work for me in the last little while has changed how I think about tribes and networks. And then the last one that I would do, which, like everything, you have to take it with a little bit of salt, and you may have to fast forward during certain parts of the podcast. Hopefully not on this one.
Of course not.
But the one for me that really sticks out a little bit is Tribe of Mentors. That is a podcast that is done by Tim Ferriss.
Yep.
He's a little bit edgy, but he also talks in very plain, succinct ways to back up good idea with something that is usually quite game changing in terms of what you can pick up from there. Yeah. And there's so many others that I feel like that you have to look around. You exchange, like hockey cards. You exchange, good podcasts with somebody for them to put in the car when they're, driving to the cottage, or just load on your iPod. I'm giving away my age. Load on your iPod as you want to go for a walk, right? Like in the mornings or something. So,
and that's why I always ask.
Those are a couple.
That's why I always ask, because I'm a huge podcast fan, and I've been listening to them for a long time. And they're just a wonderful way to get as much information while you're stuck in wonderful Toronto traffic.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, it doesn't need to be earth shattering. I think about, before I started a consulting business called SwitchGrear, I didn't want to be like everybody else. As a matter of fact, most people don't love consultants.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And this one person said one thing to me that's always changed, and they said, solve something that's got a really big price tag, and the world will beat a path to your door. And I've always taken that away because, when I'm challenging my little team of 12, we're not solving the problem here. We're just doing another recommendation. We're not helping them implement. And it constantly redefines, like if we're not actually solving something, we'll go away.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So those are like you pick up the little pearls by just kind of, engaging in dialogue. So I love the podcast. I also love the dialogue that you wish you could ask the podcaster.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Or the host. Like you wish you could right now, stop, let's go deeper. Right.
Yeah. Very good. Perfect. Well, I'll add those books and podcasts to the show notes afterwards. This has been great. Is there any other recommendations you have for budding entrepreneurs, or especially those individuals that might be thinking about going at it on their own, currently at a day job, but aren't too sure yet that's what they want to commit to?
Yeah. Like I have lots of it, but and a lot of times, having done this a long time, people come to me, and I literally have a life cycle of, like you're going to start here and you're going to give yourself a job, right? Like that's not a company. It really isn't an entrepreneur. What you're really doing is giving yourself a job that has some flexibility, that you get a say in it, and so on and so forth. And that may earn you the right to be an expert and to study and to get better at and learn, so that you can incrementally contribute more. My biggest one that I like, if you and I were on our third beer of the night and I think people shouldn't wait. Yeah. I think people are on this, well, you were, we're on this one way toboggan ride, and you don't get to go back, and you're going to go over a bump. And we know what the end of this thing looks like, right? We literally all go to the same spot, and we stop at the same spot.
Big cliff.
Well, yeah, but I think that it's, for me, people doing something, like people say, follow your passion. And I think that's a little bit of like a good starting point. But my coaching is always don't wait, right? Like you can be an entrepreneur, and you see a lot of people like Laurent, like people who are entrepreneurs doing something really, really fantastic, at a large company, who one day say, I've got this and I could do this for somebody else.
Yep.
So you're literally practicing your, entrepreneurship study group while you're, while you're doing your full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you start to be able to say, I could do this for somebody, right? I think waiting for the great idea or for a really unique idea is one way to think about it.
Yeah.
But the other one is, I'm doing this incredible catalytic work for a large company to get something big to change and happen.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think I could put a brand and a shingle out, and I could do this for someone else. That's my thought.
And I got to say, the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed, whether on the show or separately, the ones I've had the easiest transition, who knew the customers they were going to go after day one, who knew the operational requirements that they had to put in place, were the ones that just took something that they were familiar with and turned it into their entrepreneurial gig.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. And it was actually impressive to see some of the people that had started from zero and how quickly they brought revenue in the door, because for them, it was just, instead of doing my day job over here at this firm, I'm doing my day job over here on my kitchen table. And
totally.
There's no difference. Yeah.
Totally. And in many cases, you can white label something you're doing for somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting paid to become an expert. And that's the first step, that you bingo, bango, bongo get to be able to solve something that's, I always come back to, what are you solving? Does it have a price tag?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I love that. I love that advice that you recognize, because I think we're all waiting for this creative divine intervention from, the next Airbnb or the next Uber. I think in many cases, it's just recognizing the pattern from what I'm around every day and saying, actually, this vegan restaurant here could, work way up north somewhere. And, all of a sudden I'm an entrepreneur running my own establishment. So
yeah. Absolutely.
I think it's. I think you're working on your next gig while you're doing this one.
Makes sense. Perfect. Well, I can't thank you enough. This was awesome advice. I got a couple of books to read apparently after I get off here, and I'm very much looking forward to it. The impact that a couple of those meetings with Verticore had on me was profound, and it changed my view of the importance of tribes, my network, and just people to help. Like, entrepreneurship does not need to be lonely, does not need to be something where you're reinventing the wheel, like you said when we started off. Actually, that was a big reason why I wanted to have you on, because it made a difference already. And I'm looking forward to continuing our relationship and the group that I met while I was there. So
awesome. Well, thank you for. I obviously feel very passionate about it, and it's having spawned several different versions and contributed in different formats. I think you're attracted to something that resonates for you, and I'm glad that Verticore and the time we spent together resonated for you to come back.
Perfect. Bruce, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, what is the best way for them to do so?
You can find me on LinkedIn, SwitchGrear.ca, proudly.ca. And certainly you can look me up if somebody wants to find me.
Sounds good. Bruce, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Laurent, thanks. Been a lot of fun.
All right. Have a great one. Take care.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Mad Profit Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, or the listening platform of your choice. Also, check us out at MadXCapital.com for more useful information and resources to help you achieve your investing, entrepreneurial, and business goals. See you next week on the Mad Profit Podcast.